All set? Okay, welcome everybody. This is a continuation of our planning session from Thursday and Friday of last week. We had so much to say, we weren't able to get it all done by the end of the day on Friday, so we felt that within these next 90 minutes or so, we could conclude our discussion. So we're back in talking, and everybody is here except John Moffett, who will be here at in about an hour. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues. The subject was communication, I think, which was the last major issue that we wanted to talk about that we didn't get to. And so who wants to get started?
I would be happy to defer to one of my colleagues, but particularly since Councilmember Heidensfelder put together a thoughtful very thoughtful kind of introduction to this topic.
Well, I'm not sure I would call it an introduction, but at least when I was thinking about it and preparing for this meeting, it's always easier for me to put something in writing. So I shared that with all of you as in an email. So when we talk about communication, I think I had the sense also last week that we all agreed that we have a gap to fill as it relates to the expectations from the community. And I think we also had some community members making comments on Thursday about that. I personally perceive that there is improvement that has taken place in terms of the town's communication over, let's say, the last 12 months period. But I think there are areas where we can really be, where we can really do better. And I think better in terms of providing information in a more timely manner, right when they come to our knowledge, for which we maybe need to, remind everybody in the town staff to provide this information. But, Mingo Point is an example for me. I think we knew about this since the January, February timeframe, that there's something coming along.
Yeah, as I understand it, I think the Planning Commission, but that may not be correct, was aware of it in January. Oh, you guys weren't? Somebody was.
Well, John Taylor was maybe, but not the Planning Commission, but the Planning Department.
All right, because when I was on the BZA, I was not aware of it until November.
No, I'm referring to staff, Russ.
Yes, oh, okay,
So,
okay.
So I think there is the need to be
And
more.
indeed, just to clarify in that regard, the planning director did send a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah. I mean, internal processes developed as it would be necessary, I assume. But I think we need to do better to communicate that within the town and to the council, and then start communicating earlier. So that's my first one. So be more proactive, be a little bit ahead of the curve in what we are communicating. I think there's also the need to be a little bit more detailed in what we are communicating and more comprehensive. The MSU facility, situation comes to mind where we knew that there's a holdup, but we only reacted to questions from the community. We could have, actually anticipated that. I think there is some need to review existing information on the website, especially when we now start to convert into the new website layout. I think we want to make sure that there's a proper, process that also involves the council. And last but not least, I think we really need to discuss how we as councilmen, and hopefully at some point women, are communicating with the community in a more active way beyond or aside from the meetings we have here regularly in the town hall. So then I summarized probably 8 recommendations that I want to briefly mention. So first, I think I would be very much in favor to offer open communication sessions. Somebody mentioned words like town hall meetings, or I'm used from my prior life to call something like this a jour fixe, but something where we as council members, in not all 5 of us, but in a certain way, maybe 2 of us on a rotating basis, maybe in the beginning every 2 weeks, later on maybe once a month, where we basically be available for community members virtually and in person to respond to questions, concerns, input and suggestions, recommendations, and criticism. Just to be available. I think we all done that during our campaign, and that was very well received by the community, and I think we might owe that to the community to continue doing this. Second, I think the podcasts have become a quite favorable communication platform also for the community. I think there could be done more. Yes, more in podcasts, but also in different setups, right? So I could envision that, for example, two of us would, be interviewed to a particular topic and look at it from different angles. We could invite other stakeholders of the island to be interviewed. We could even do this in an open fashion, also similar to my first point, have a podcast on the stage in Freshfields at the lawn and ask questions from people passing by or making comments to it. So I think the podcast is a good platform, but I think there's more potential in there.
Yeah, I like the idea of involving the community. I think that's great.
Yeah. And my intention here would really to also break down little barriers, right? I mean, we want to be approachable. So people don't need to come here. They need to have other ways, and we can use other facilities on the island to be available for these meetings and for those open podcasts. As I said, proactiveness is very important from my point of view. We need to follow the suggestions that were also made by our consultant to make sure that all department heads on a very regular and instant basis communicate what they think should be also shared with the community. I think there's an opportunity for us to also do communication more in conjunction with other entities on the island. Certainly KICA comes in mind, to collaborate. Again, also in open sessions. So I could imagine that we also do these kind of town hall, jour fixe type of meetings also with one councilman and one board member of KICA, for example. Could be very interesting. I think we also need to discuss if we need to be more specific in our communication. We have so many different stakeholder groups, residents and property owners, we have visitors and tourists, we have contractors. So there is a little bit of that already seen on the website, but I think I would like to discuss if we need to do a little bit more of such. And be more specific to these different interest groups as it relates to the island. I also mentioned on Thursday or Friday that at least I'm of the belief that sometimes we also need to not only show the beautiful side of our island in the communication, but also concerns we might have. Environmental concerns come into thought here. Not everything needs to be perfect, but only if we can really segregate more our communication to the different stakeholder groups that I mentioned earlier. The newsletter is a great, next point, newsletter is a great platform. We have a lot of subscriptions, as we learned on Thursday. There was a new number to me. I knew like 3,000, now we know it's actually 11,000. But there are, of course, a lot of people on the subscription list that are not residents, obviously. So I think we need to be more far-reaching in really focusing on our core constituency here, means property owners. And last but not least, as also the mayor suggested on Thursday, I believe, or maybe Friday, is we need to come to an agreement how we are dealing with other communication platforms here on the island. If we are quiet, if we are participating, in what way we are participating. And I would suggest that we find a way of participating in, for example, something like IKEA, just to, on one side, as one community member mentioned on Thursday, if we see something, then we say something, if it becomes not civil. But I think also if we see posts that are clearly wrong in facts and figures, and then, counter. I encouraged Stephanie in several cases in the past weeks to do so, and I think it was very well received. But I think we need to discuss this. So those are my recommendations that I wanted to discuss, if we can agree on some of them. I think my heart especially goes out to this topic of being available for the community, having those fixed town hall meetings, just be there for our community to ask questions and voice concerns and criticism if necessary.
Well, I already said I love your getting together with the town hall. Hopefully we can, but I'm going to talk about something that I think hopefully we can just get out of the way quicker. It has to do with the incivility that we see on IKEA. I don't know how I fall on this, whether I think we should get involved or not get involved. I don't know. And that's why I'm bringing it up, because I think we should discuss it. You know, I remember the comment very clearly about nobody seems to be stepping up to the plate from the town council side when somebody in IKEA steps out of bounds. Should we? I don't know. I know it was suggested, so I think we should discuss that. Should we or should we not?
Well, you're
Right.
not asking that question
Right.
generally with engagement IKEA.
No, I was
what
referring to the civility when somebody is
civility.
getting mean and nasty.
I mean, there are two aspects. One is the civility aspect that I brought up. The other one is the wrong facts and figures topic, right? So I was not just suggesting here that we would, become frequent posters, message deliverers on IKEA, but if we see something that is either uncivil, one topic, or is clearly, statements that are wrong, where we need to correct and inform the community properly, those are the two things that I would bring into play here, out of which I know for the mayor, especially the first one is very important.
Yeah, I would agree. So, but I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, I certainly have no issue whatsoever, personally speaking, if any one of us individually wants to go in there in individual capacity and say, it's not representing a town view, that, I think this is, unfortunate and irresponsible. It's whatever kind of words you want to use. I would question whether there's any kind of formal town position that could be espoused with regard to what constitutes appropriate civility. I think we just onboard that ourselves. I would be a little hesitant, again, to try to have any governmental imprimatur
I know.
on that. Just, speaking personally, I wish people would tone it down, be more respectful. I said the same thing in publicly in my podcast, and others have said, Michael and you have both said the same thing in public context, and I think that's perfectly fine. We can reinforce that during council meetings, and I don't have any issue doing it on IKEA. There is a separate issue, though, with regard to the question of what is factually wrong or not. And I think that's a more challenging one. Again, this is part of a broader conversation regarding IKEA and notwithstanding the concerns that people have. Again, I've expressed the view that I think it is the only kind of town hall or town forum that exist right now, for better and for worse. It's the only opportunity to exchange ideas in kind of real time, share information, inaccurate or otherwise. There certainly is a lot of inaccurate information in there. Not all of the information, I would submit, on IKEA is in fact inaccurate, and separating that out can be challenging. There are some things, like there were twice, when I posted things, Stephanie has immediately gotten back to me to correct something which was factually incorrect. And the first one was, I think, I referenced kind of what I missed way back upon a time, one was with respect to the ownership of Freshfields. But interestingly enough, I pointed out, though it was still my mistake, that it was still on South Street Partners' website, but be that as it may. The other time was simply a typo where I think I said Toki instead of Kika. But immediately corrected the record. She only came back to me. I would have had no issue
To do that publicly.
if she does that publicly, if it's something that is clearly, objectively, demonstrably, factually incorrect. Then it starts getting into the, beyond that, the fuzzy stuff. What's just kind of different views about what constitute the relevant
Opinion,
fact.
yeah,
And it
somebody's
kind of starts
opinion,
getting opinion, a little bit of
Yeah.
a gray area. There, again, I have no issue with any council member, in their individual capacity, chiming in on any of those, expressing a view, expressing what they think the relevant facts are. But if it's going to be and this is going to get into a broader discussion I'm going to have about the development resources page, if it purports to be something that is essentially official town position as to what constitutes facts and/or an opinion or a statement of policy, then it strikes me that we do need to have some type of policy and procedure around that, an approval process for the council.
Makes sense.
Are you saying from a policy standpoint, Ms. Council, or from an operational standpoint?
Well, how would you distinguish those two, Stephanie?
So, trying to, turn this on. So I'm trying to work through, as an example, with the website, so the development resource page, I think clearly that's something that you all would like to be able to take a look at as we're working on the new web page and looking at some of the concerns that you may have and talking those through. So it could be more that is more specific, or are you saying that from a operation standpoint that you think there should be some sort of set up through council that anything that town wants to publish on the website needs to go through council, which then becomes putting council in the operation part of it instead of as what council does is set policy. So that's what I'm trying to say. Are you just saying, like that one, maybe there's some specific things that you guys feel you want to get involved with, but you clearly are not trying to get involved in the operations of the town.
And that is a fair question, and I certainly, we don't have, I think, the time nor inclination or capability to micromanage. But this does kind of raise for me, and again, it relates in part to the development resources page. What is the process that actually exists currently, and what should be the process going forward for dissemination of kind of substantive, policy-related information expressing kind of a point of view or position? Because there are a number, and we can come back to it, infirmities with regard to the development resources page that raise all those issues in my mind. But, where it becomes difficult, Stephanie, is, for example, to go back to the announcement that went out about the 4 a.m., authorization. The town put out a communication, said there's going to be pouring at 4 a.m. on the Cape. Understanding how that happened and how communications go out with the review process. That's kind of a core issue. How is it that that was allowed to happen? And if we have a better understanding of that, or there's a better process, then my own personal view is, no, do I want to, personally speak, review that kind of communication goes out? No, but to the extent that it was a very problematic communication, both substantively and procedurally, it calls into question whether we have the right process in place. So it's not a great answer to your question. My inclination would be, if it's kind of more operational, then as long as we have we're confident that there's a good internal review process, and understand who's signing off on things, that's fine with me.
Yeah, just to piggyback a little bit on what you just said, using that example, I would agree. During that time is when we were transitioning like we are right now with regards to communications team. So historically, probably with a more experienced communication person in that role, that error would have been caught. So essentially, it came from a department head to the new communications person saying, we need to put this out, so put it out. And that person not understanding the time, the process. So it went out in error. And so we did, probably in the last year, probably the first 6 months, we had to go back and look at, the things that we did wrong and trying to correct that. And that's why right now we are working on hiring a new communications manager coming in with experience so they can hit the ground running. And then we can start talking about the things that we're talking about today so that we're all on the same sheet of music, as opposed to, it was just kind of really just an unfortunate time that the town was transitioning, and those things we should have caught and we just didn't.
So I hear that, and I can appreciate that that may have been true. And with a more experienced communication manager, perhaps they would have recognized that that communication should not have gone out. This was primarily focused on communication, but what you're raising is also a separate set of issues. How is it that a department head made that decision to authorize, pouring of concrete on the Cape in contravention of a whole bunch of different rules, and then felt comfortable simply saying to the communication manager, push this out?
Well, normally with the senior staff, we're always asking for different things of content. So that's not unusual for a senior staff person to go to the communications manager and say, hey, I have this information. I would like for it to be put in the e-blast. Normally it's vetted, but this was, I think, again, just a time where an error had occurred, and that senior staff person should not have directed someone with less experience to do something.
Stephanie, I'm making a different point, though. How is it, and this is a digression from...
If you're talking about how can a person talk about the pouring, that's different than the communication piece.
That's what
Well, that's a whole different conversation than what we're talking about, communication.
But that's the question I'm now posing, because that issue's now been raised. Yes, it is separate from communication, but it still calls into question, again, a number of processes. I was stunned. I still can't fathom to this day, on either side of the table, how a department manager, notwithstanding various ordinances, KICA requirements, and otherwise, simply was able to make a decision, let alone whether they communicate.
I think in other circumstances, the person could have made the decision with regards to pouring if it wasn't behind the gate, and for whatever reason they made an error, and we caught that error.
All right, so let me just step in, because there's an engineering thing involved with this. So it's actually a very simple answer with respect to the pouring. This was during the middle of the summer. If it's extremely hot out, which it was at that point, the concrete can cure too fast, and it will crack and fail. So it's actually rather common in the heat of the summer to have that kind of pouring. Now, there are other things you can do to prevent the curing too fast, such as literally putting ice into the mixture. I just want to let you know, the reason why it was done, that was the cheaper alternative
And I
for the
actually did
developer,
some
to do
research at the
that.
time and understood that that's exactly from
That's the cheaper
cost,
alternative.
from the developer, from the
Correct.
construction company.
Yes.
That was optimal for them.
Correct. I just
Before-
wanted you to understand,
I
so
appreciate
you are aware
So-
of it, so, okay.
So let's depart a little bit from this, because we don't want to leave the room here with a concrete pouring certificate. So what I heard so far is the following. A, when it comes to communication on IKEA, but also on other platforms, there's a Facebook page, and as we experienced in December, also communication that is directed either to the mayor or all of us in commentary. I would encourage all of us to say something. Right? I have to say, I was personally hesitant when some of these things happen on IKEA, because I don't want to be then getting involved and issuing one email after the other. because there's now a tendency that even little issues, are put into the open, for 30, 40, 50 emails. The Post and Courier comes into mind this rainy Sunday, I believe it was.
It continues.
And it still continues. But I think what Brad McElvine reminded us of, and I think that's a very important statement, if you see something, you say something. And I think we should all step in. We did this in December, but if something is on the platform, I would say we are okay if we are beginning that response by saying we are not representing the council, but speaking as, a civil person and a property owner.
Well, I want to
Right.
jump,
Joe, would
I
you-
want to jump in here now and just, the question that I think, and I posed this to Chris and I posed this even to the consultants. The listserv provides a very valuable function to the community in terms of getting out information. You refer to it as something, Brad, and I agree with you, it is the town hall or the question that I ask myself, we have a series of mechanisms in which we communicate right now. A, is that enough? B, with the whole advent and the expectation that social media provides for, my God, the society as a whole, should we critically evaluate the mechanisms that we have, and should we entertain adopting our own mechanism to communicate to the community on town business? I don't know that I would promote us being a voice on the listserv, because it has a value, carpenters, housekeepers, landscapers, whatever. And oh, by the way, now we're gonna make this big decision, we're talking about this big decision on something. I don't think we should be
And it's private.
competing against that. So I guess one question is looking at our mechanisms, how we communicate. Two, getting back to the point about engaging the community, what does the community want? And in an era gone by, we did surveys. We would ask our employees, what do you want? How do you think? How are you feeling about this, that, and whatever? We did this quite frequently, provided all kinds of feedback. So I'm not certain that with our new manager that isn't something that we pose to the community at large. What mechanism do you want us to communicate to? E-blasts, newsletters, et cetera, and begin to design a mechanism around what people truly want, how they want to receive information and what type of information that they wish to receive. And then I think third, getting back to, although I was looking forward to a certificate on concrete pouring, third is the editorial responsibility. Who has it? How does that work? And I agree with Stephanie. We get an experienced communication manager, someone that has, done this. I think those kinds of answers will come out. So I think those are the kinds of the policy issues that we as a council should be looking at. What do they want? What does the community want? How do they want it? When do they want it? Those types of things. The right way to do it. We're going to do a website, or we're going to have a website. Maybe that's it. I don't know. We should talk about that. And then the editorial responsibilities that govern it. But
So, Mayor, I think you've raised a
Brad, I
Can
think
I just-
Joe
just
wants to
real
say something.
briefly, just to jump on what both Brad and Michael have said, I think it is very important. You are free as individuals. You don't lose your First Amendment rights when you join council. You're free to go say whatever you want on social media. It is important to iterate that you are not speaking on behalf of the town. Once someone starts speaking on behalf of the town, becomes subject to FOIA, there are retention requirements. This is a common issue when towns operate their own Facebook pages. Maybe y'all even talked about this Friday, but you're supposed to retain everything on that Facebook page, including, people coming in and deleting. You've got to have that deleted comment. So it's strongly recommended that any kind of formal announcements from the town be in a controlled forum.
Yeah. And I was not suggesting, Joe, in my earlier comments that we are using iKiowa now as a platform to communicate, because we have our website, we have our newsletter.
I'm just
But-
adding what
but
Carlos said. and
By going systematically through the different points, so I think if we start a response on iKiowa about, a civil matter, I think we should be encouraged to do so if we feel like it as a private person. We should make clear at the beginning, if I understand Joe correctly, that we are speaking on our behalf and not on behalf of the council, and then make a comment, right? So I think that's my first pillar of agreement that we seem to have among us.
That makes sense.
When it comes to wrong information that is contemplated on iKiowa, let's say there is a little one like Brad, you mentioned, because you mixed up Toki and Kika and there was something else. I would hope that we could find a process where then either our new communication manager or Stephanie or somebody, gets notified by us that there is a mistake, and then we respond from the town, not from the councilman, but from the town. That would be my preference. And if it's just a quick thing like, Brett, I'm sorry, but I think you mixed up, Toki and Kika, do it in public, but from one source. Again, either it's the new Chris or it's Stephanie. If it's a broader amount of wrong information that is displayed on iKiowa, I would, of course, hope that we could then, again, have maybe the new Chris or Stephanie post a link to our website, so that we don't engage into lengthy emails, but we're saying, dear community, we want to make you aware there's a little bit of wrong information going on here. Please go to website XYZ of ours, and you will find all the facts and figures. That was my idea of dealing with iKiowa.
So a couple thoughts in that regard, Michael. And kind of conceptually, at some high level, I agree that the execution or devil's in the details always. Just one thing, I think the mayor raised a very good question, and Stephanie and I have had this conversation to some extent about whether there are additional tools or things that we could have, we could utilize ourselves. I will, in addition to this kind of forum, or the council meeting that starts in 50 minutes, look for opportunities to engage with constituents. And yes, I completely agree with Michael on the whole town hall concept. Either simply we can all do that as one-offs, which is fine, or we can institutionalize a little bit, which may be better. And I'm happy to pursue that. But one of the things we've talked about is the e-blast is fine for sending out kind of general town news. There are times when I want to communicate my views to our constituents. Now, right now, the only way to do that is through iKiowa. It's imperfect. It doesn't get to all our constituents. There is, as Stephanie said, I guess there's the capability to do an e-blast, like a statement from a council member.
Like a blog, or even create like a blog that we push out.
Well,
for you.
this gets to the very good point that Joe raised. So there's two different aspects to this. What the town square, the town hall of iKiowa allows is kind of real-time, too unfiltered, but engagement and back and forth and discussion. But that captures a lot of stuff, and I think Joe's admonition is exactly right. I'm not sure we want to go down that path and having something sponsored by the town that is kind of opens up to that type of discussion or dialogue. But I would certainly have no hesitation about putting out something, council members' personal views on a particular topic, and I invite people to email me back. If they do, that's foiable, and that's fine. But I don't know if we just kind of want to open up generally or not. I invite, I'm happy to have
But
that.
why would you not be able to do this with the newsletter blast.
But there are times, again, I'm not sure quite what that process is. I'm not quite sure that I feel comfortable, Michael, necessarily being constrained by that from a format and timing standpoint.
Okay, that's a valid point.
But you know, that's certainly something worth considering. If we can set up a mechanism where, you know, council members, it's not analogous, but, you know, members of Congress, you know, they have their own ability to disseminate through the congressional email and communication system their own messages, both nationally and to their constituents. I'm not sure, again, it's not a great analogy, but we don't have any of that capability to communicate more directly. And
With regards to that, one of the things that we're looking at really is in regards to our $11,000
Subscribers.
member list. I did dig a little deeper into that over the weekend. To Brad's point, I think a little bit. So fortunately, I think we're a little bit, I don't want to say misleading, but what I would say is that when I looked into that a little bit, we have a total of 11,000. About 3,000 or 4,000 of them is Arts Council. They just get information on Arts Council. Probably another 2,000 or 3,000 is contractors. Just our notifications, our e-blasts, town notes people have signed up for, it's about 3,200, 3,500.
Okay, so that's the number you gave me earlier.
Yeah, so back to Brad's point, if he's wanting to, you know, put out information to the community, if we're pushing it out, Brad has to be in the back of his head, it's like, okay, out of that 3,500, how many are actually residents? Because our e-blast, unlike Kika's, and potentially IKEA, is open to the public. So out of our 3,500 that receive notification, it could be 3/4 of them could be not even Kiowa residents. They could just be people who were here for a day. So if he is
also
trying
relevant.
to get a certain message out, he may not be hitting the target audience that he thinks he's hitting by going through our list. But with that said, working with you, we're trying to figure out ways to be able to build up our resident numbers in terms of those that sign up for our information.
so we'll come back to, that would be very helpful. And that strikes me as something that perhaps Lou Hammond Group might be helpful with regard to architecting that. I'm not sure if the conversation is right now, but I have profound concerns about the substantive capabilities of, and some of the advice and counsel that Lou Hammond Group has given, at least as it pertains to the development resources page. But I'm not sure if I'm kind of can hold on that. I don't know if there's some other issues that we might want to work through. By the way, just a slight digression, and I may mention this in the 2 o'clock meeting if others are around as well, is I sat through the 5 hours of the Kika board meeting yesterday that was in person at the town, at the old municipal center. And it was quite well attended. About probably 50 people in the room, if not more, a number on video as well. A lot of engagement, and some of it got fairly vigorous at times. But what there clearly was a different dynamic there. Again, it's a double-edged sword a little bit, but there was a lot of back and forth between the Kika board members and members of the community. And I think they welcome and embrace that. Now, the issues that were raised, 2 of them were, you know, things that are pretty fundamental, and one, at least one of which we talked about last Thursday, which issues related to the ARB. Another one was kind of governance issues with regard to Kika. Now, the other one was and that was probably 20 of the people there, that's what they were most interested in, just use of the Sandcastle. There were some recommendations about the Sandcastle users group. But what I found, and maybe it wasn't as controlled as it could have been, is it allowed for a better discussion and dialogue, a back and forth than occurs in town council meetings. I actually thought, even though there were only probably 6 or 8 people, that what we did last Thursday and Friday was actually pretty helpful and constructive. And if we could have more kinds of interaction like that with engaged community members, I think that I would learn a lot. I would find that to be very helpful. I don't think the council meetings, the way we've constructed them, are, you know, are nearly as, there may be a reason that a lot of people don't come, because it's mostly just kind of reporting out on this side, and then they get to say their comments, and then, just kind of, we look at them blankly, and then they go back to their seat, and then we move on. I don't think that's the dynamic. John, you posed the question, what does the community want? I get the sense that they want something more.
Well, I agree, but again, in many, it's like the founding fathers set up the association and set up the town. They're two markedly different entities, one community. And I'm trying to think, we had HOA meetings that were always well-attended all the time because it was something that really was relevant to us. I can't imagine going to a town council meeting where we used to live. It was like distant from it. And I think that applies to a certain extent here. That's the HOA meeting. That affects all of us. So everybody should be really interested. Here you have to kind of pick and choose what's going to be on the agenda.
But actually, I think that's probably generally true, is can we, and this gets back to the point that Michael had raised in one of his recommendations, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is if we are doing more things and conveying more information that's of interest to members, then some of that may solve itself.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely.
And that's why I was saying, there could be certain rules we defined in how we want to use IKEA, or how we want to enrich, is maybe the better word, of IKEA in terms of civility. That was my one point, and the other in correcting wrong facts. But I think over time, if, for example, we would do something like these town halls or Azure Fix meetings, I think some of it will also go away because the information is out there and is available to people. And I agree with you, Brad. I think there's a hunger in the community for more information. There's a hesitation to come here for this meeting, and even speak on video. I think that also might scare away a few people. But if we have something like these town halls, et cetera, that we would like to put out there, I think it lowers the barrier, right? We become, as council members, more approachable. And I think you could already see it on Thursday, where we were at least not sitting here behind this huge desk, but more in a small group setting or workshop setting. I think the interaction with the community members were far more intense and valuable. And that's why I'm saying, we need to hopefully come to an agreement today in the last 40 minutes that we want to, create a concept and go out there and then test. If nobody shows up, all right, then we need to look for something else. But I would be surprised if that's the outcome. But my biggest wish for today would be that we come to an agreement of putting something out there. To your comments about, and Stephanie's comments about the newsletter, the e-newsletter and the e-blasts, et cetera, so there are actually quite a few that I didn't share with you, only with Stephanie. A couple of activities that we could, start to increase the number of, and I'm not sure how to word, but a number of subscribers that are really invested in the island, let's say it this way. So property owners. Those 3,000 something we have today, there should probably be more in the 5,000 to 6,000 range. And we can start different activities that also would involve us to encourage people to subscribe, make them even known there is something to subscribe. And that would, make the e-blast and the e-newsletters far more valuable. And at some point, we have the platform that we need, and we don't need to proliferate, from Facebook to IKEA to website to e-blast, right? So that would be my hope.
If we can evolve there, I think that would be very helpful and constructive. So I do want to, because Michael, you talked about this issue, and this gets into these kind of policy questions. What is fact? What is opinion? So again, I had, wearing my old hat, just as or I still have that concern wearing a resident hat, some profound concerns about the development resources page. I also believe, wearing my town council hat, that it's been problematic. At least one of the more problematic aspects was subsequently rectified. But this gets kind of to the issue of what constitutes a town position. And how do we resolve issues or questions with regard to what is a town position? Now, you really don't want me to go through systematically through the development resources.
No, I
page.
can work with you.
Huh?
I can work with you on that.
I'm happy
separately.
to have that happen, but you know, even at the start, I get that it was well-intended and to respond to a lot of what was going on, to the extent that Lou Hammond Group extols this as their signature, you know, deliverable. I think it is profoundly misguided in some critical respects. And even was starting off that the intention was to provide whole and accurate information and to correct misinformation, just kind of the lead in, always stuck in my craw. It sounds a little bit infantile. And, but apart from that, it is not, in my opinion, complete and accurate in numerous respects. And again, I'm not going to belabor all of those things, but even silly little things like, you know, frequently asked question, who oversees the KIR-ARB? The second sentence is, the goal of the ARB is to achieve an uncommon and visually pleasing blend of natural beauty and man-made improvements. It's not answering the question, it's a PR statement on behalf of the ARB that was supposedly, apparently drafted by Lou Hammond Group, who also had them as a client. And you can kind of go on and on and on, pick apart several aspects of this. But again, a lot of this is saying this is what the town's policy and position is. And it's not clear that any of this stuff went through any process to establish that the town council had resolved on any of this or anything, so.
Okay,
Yes,
so I would make the following proposal, that we create a little work group, and I think it's a perfect timing now that we are transitioning to the new website, and this little work group goes through the current content of that page, of that resource page, and flags those items that might require some additional review. I don't know if this is 5% or 10% or more of it. I don't know.
85?
Let's figure that out, okay? Let's flag them. Then each council member could have a chance to look at these flags and provide commentary. Changes are made. New updates are posted on the new website. Similar, this work group could also review what we talked about earlier, this process that exists of what is the control to put something on the website, respectively, you know, into an e-blast. And I don't want to bring up this concrete pouring, but it is an example for that. Look at that process and provide recommendations for improvements. I don't think that it is practical that any of us, you know, gets involved in approving communication. That should not be the case. It's not practical. I don't think that we really have the time, aside from what we are already spending for this job. You know, at least set the rules for the process, and there might be exception if something is very sensitive, then we might want to get involved, but look at the process, make recommendations, and then we can discuss and implement.
Well, I think we have a couple of opportunities here. I would say, and I think Stephanie would agree, when we have quote-unquote public hearings, there's very few people, if any, show up. So that could be, look at our agenda today, we have a second and final reading. I'm not sure anybody will necessarily be here. So in terms of the in terms of the thought that we would get out more into the community to really find out how the community feels about things, I think those are some valid points. You know, we could have different sessions to ask people how they feel about the marsh management plan. You know, their thoughts relative to the noise ordinance that was approved last year. I mean, most of these ordinances have multiple readings. And unless people show up, you know, we're talking to ourselves. So I think those could be some, at least to start, agenda items if we want to have, that would be fine, town hall meetings to engage the community, what we're going to talk about and/or other things. The second thing is citizen comments. We will get, depending upon the agenda item, people coming up that may say really inaccurate things and then go back home and in the confines of their den, send those things out. And how do we respond to that? And that was really one of the genesis to the development resource page in terms of a mechanism to provide responses, albeit your example, Brad's fine, that's fine, you know, maybe the PR firm took some liberties, but to a large extent, they're run through council. When we're talking about something that is more substantive, that deals with ordinances or development agreements, you know, we're checking with John, you know, but then we have to convert that from what the legal rendition would be or whatever into a document that becomes more readable. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. So I think these are just things that we can improve upon. And maybe, as you say, Michael, we'll just go through all of the ones right now to try to find out which ones are a little bit more glaring than others in terms of things that we could have or should have said differently. And learn from that, and next iteration, you know, do it better.
And Mayor, I agree with it. And Michael, I think if we have a process and we'll look through systematically at something like the development resources page, again, I think we need to, in that context, come up with a, you know, something. If the development resources page simply provided as the archives, I used to always just go to the archives, and occasionally I would go to the development resources page, not because I thought it was much of a resource, just because I wanted to see what the heck the town was saying was a position. If it were simply a catalog of here are the relevant documents, here are the relevant ordinances, here are the relevant state statutes, that would be one thing. Different, and it evolved into something that tended to be at least perceived, rightly or wrongly, as reactive, and the town trying to justify actions that it had already taken rather than kind of educate about the process that's going on. There were a couple of instances, and that's what I'm saying, one of which specifically I'm trying to wear my town hat, the town council hat, that I think was very, very, very problematic, and I pointed it out at the time for the town. And it called into the question the process, whether Joe or Stephanie or the council was involved or not. And that was the one, if you will recall, and the question is still there. Why did the Planning Commission approve an annual extension for the land known as Captain Sam Spit? The language that's there now is perfectly fine. It's objective, factual information. This is simply the process. At the time, you will recall that's been changed. The morning after the Planning Commission meeting, there was a detailed recitation of supposedly why the town had approved the Captain Sam Spit extension. Several problems with that. One, the town hadn't done anything. The Planning Commission had taken a vote. That there was absolutely no explanation provided by the Planning Commission as a result of that vote. None. So how could there next morning be a discussion of what the town's rationale was for approving? But more problematically, everything that occurred in that conversation was apparently in executive session. And yet here we have publicly the next day, because council, I believe Planning Commission members were still under the impression that they couldn't talk about what had occurred in executive session. Yet the next day, the entire contents of the rationale the council had provided was there on a public page.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Let me preface this with two things.
Yeah.
One, I apologize for being late.
Yeah.
And two, I don't feel good. Okay? Which should be code for, here it comes. I hear what you're saying, Brad, and that does us no good. We're not going to go back and change what we did 6 months ago. I think what Michael's point is let's decide what we need to do going forward. Rehashing this stuff again and again and again serves zero purpose. And if I'd have known that's what we were going to do, I'd have stayed home another 30 minutes to see if I felt better. Because so far, it's been of zero value for me to sit here.
John, I'm delighted
That's all
to
I got
hear
to
that,
say.
I'm delighted to hear that you find it of no value. That's fine. I find it to be very valuable to have conversations with my fellow council members. I agree with Michael. What I'm saying is there was a different aspect of this than just what the substance is right now. It's to try to figure out, part of this is, what is the process if we're putting out something?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
Right, that's exactly what I said, right? Let's, A, go through the site, flag all the documents that are problematic, have a look at them, and potentially revise them if necessary, as you obviously did, which I was not aware. Perfect, right? Second, look at the process, how things end up on the page, because we also need to look forward. You know, there's a new web page and you know, there's new stuff that goes on there. You know, what's going to be the process? Do we have to be involved? Hopefully not in everything, but there might be certain things where one of us or some of us or all of us need to be involved. Let's look at the process. Let's define the rule. Let's give staff something to work with. And then hopefully that works, and what you're describing will not happen again. And that means, as John said, we learn from the past and we improve going forward. And that's the only thing that matters. Also to me, to be honest, Brad, and you know that. I mean, I'm always looking forward. How can we improve? How can we do it better? How can we satisfy the needs of our community? That's it, period. That mistakes were made, okay, maybe. So be it. The only mistake we can really make is if we don't learn from it and change. And that's why I said, let's flag what is not appropriate, let's look at them, let's improve them, and let's look at the process and give Stephanie and her team, you know, the tools they need to move on from here in a good way. That's all I'm saying to that. So.
Well, I think that's a fair conclusion. That's a fair conclusion. Especially in the whole arena of development that has been and will continue to be of import to everyone, so. Anything else?
Yes, who is going to flag? Similar to what we
Well-
discussed on Thursday and Friday, who from us will take the lead and is
On
supporting?
the development
that
resource
effort?
page?
Yes. And the
Probably about a
process.
couple of weeks ago, Brad and I had talked about it, and he was supposed to sit down with me and flag it, but he hasn't yet. So I'm guessing he's
I
wanting to
mean,
do that with me.
I've gone through it kind of mentally. I haven't, I mean, we can go kind of
We can set up the time and go through it.
line by line. I'm happy to set
Okay.
aside time that's convenient for you, Stephanie.
Okay,
to-
we'll
So
do
it's,
that.
it's
Right.
Brad and Stephanie.
Look forward to that.
And that includes the process.
Well, I'm not
Looking
sure
at, looking at
process
the process we have at the
For the
moment.
development resource page?
Well, and, you know, issuing of communication, you know, is it like the concrete pouring thing? How do we
again,
work
Some of
at the
those things,
moment?
I don't
Or
know.
is, you want to keep that separate?
That's more.
Well, yeah, because Michael, it's one thing to clean up kind of what's there, and does it represent the council's current view? The reason I was raising these prior issues is not necessarily to relitigate them, but to your point, to make sure, to understand, we have agreement that there was a problem in the process. You have to first acknowledge that there was a problem with the process to be able to say, okay, we need to fix the process. That's all I'm trying to identify. And so the issue in this case is, to your point, is also, which, again, cleaning, I could be completely happy with, Stephanie and I could be completely in agreement, whether anybody else is, on, you know, this recrafting this. The issue still pertains, what about the next issue or the next time that something comes up? and then there's somebody wants their thought that there needs to be an addendum to the development resources page, and if it's something other than this was raised in IKEA or in a comment, here is the document. That's easy. But if it starts to be more editorializing, like this,
I can say,
then
Brad, you and I can work on this, and then two, when we have the new communications person, manager, they may have a different idea, but it could be right now, we haven't done anything with the development resource page, and it could be right now that it's temporarily put on hold, and we don't even have to add it to the current web page, or we can clean up, maybe rebrand it or however we want to do, and then add it on the web page. So it doesn't necessarily need to move forward in the current way that it's set up.
So what, by the way, what is the kind of latest? So I thought we were going to see the new webpage
Well,
this week?
so no.
No, okay.
I went through the web page over the weekend, and I realized I have to get more involved in it. It's not as far along as I thought. So you all do not anticipate getting anything from me for at least probably 3 weeks. I'll try to go sooner, but I want this really, there's a number of issues that I see with it, and with my schedule being busy and I have to get involved, it's going to probably be
I'm
about
not
3
suggesting we
weeks.
need to rush that. The only issue is that inextricably linked to the broken links on the current site.
That's correct. We have to try to get with Cobblestone, which is hard because I can do a little bit with the current one, but the way that it's site mapped, it is so backwards that I'm trying to fix a few things, but it really just needs to be completely brought down. It's that bad.
Okay, that's unfortunate.
But what I may try to do is put up, which before I had asked the previous communications manager, even to the effect of putting something up and saying that, a new website is work in progress, to let people know that what we have right
Yes.
now is temporary, it's not permanent, and I can even put a date to say, something further out. And of course, we would release it soon, but I can even say that our goal is to have the new website up and working by April 1st, knowing that we may want to do. But at least just putting something on the current website to let people know that, hey, when they go to it, they know that something's wrong with it and don't think that we're just kind of not paying attention to
Given
it.
how busy you are, is that something Lou Hammond Group can work on? I mean, a lot of PR firms do have website kind of capability.
They do, and so they may be able to, because I believe they do know WordPress, so I can definitely have them add something on for us. I'll just give them, access rights, and they can do that for us.
But despite, I would agree, I think putting something on the first page, reminding community members that this is basically the old version on the way out, we have difficulties to technically fix things. So if they experience, because the interesting thing is sometimes links work one day, the next day they don't, the next afternoon they work again. So it's a miracle to me. I experienced that several times. Put a little note on the front page, alert them so that they're not getting up in arms. They know that this is in development and that they will see a new website soon.
I don't know, maybe this would be generating too much additional work, an additional sentence along the lines. If there's information that you are not able to find on the website, please contact, the town. Because there is, sometimes you're trying to find specific stuff. And to your point, you've figured out how to navigate around to ultimately get there.
So in the interest of time,
Yes, I have.
we have 20 minutes left, and maybe one needs a little break, so we have 15 minutes left. I would really bring the attention of the group to the two topics again that are most important from my point of view. A is my number 7 in the email that I shared with you guys about being proactive, and that means following also the recommendations from the Lou Hammond Group of making sure that all of the department heads are raising communication-relevant topics ASAP, at least to Stephanie, but probably even beyond. Mingo Point was the example. So I think we need to establish this, if we can agree on this, giving a clear strategic recommendation to Stephanie and her team to please do so. That's maybe easy. The other one I would really like to get resolved in one way or the other is that additional communication platform we want to create. call it town hall. That was my first topic in the email, call it town hall, jour fix, whatever you want. But I think we owe it to this community as council members to be more available to them in different formats. So I would hope that if you can all agree, we put a little concept together how this would look like, discuss it next month in the meeting, approve it, and then start. And then we'll see. Maybe it's a total failure and nobody will show up, right? But maybe it is something that the community will appreciate. At least everybody that I spoke to, and I think that was the same with you, Brad, also when we spoke about that, all of the community, many community members we spoke to prior to the election would really appreciate that. So I would really like to get that going in one form or the other, have some of us work on a concept, bring it to us, and move.
And just to agree that
Agreed.
we can, I'm struggling to articulate the words, whether there needs to be, in a sense, a single format or structure, I think is a question we should explore. For example, Mayor, you had mentioned that, an agenda, we'll talk about, marsh management plan.
The podcast, that would be another platform for that.
That may be the best way to do it. What I've done in the past, and which I'm comfortable doing, is like saying, I'm going to have a brown bag lunch at the municipal center. Talk about whatever's on your mind. Literally, there is no agenda. Maybe we're going to have, Stephanie will join us, or another council member join us, or maybe head of public safety, or something like that, or Jenny Honeycutt, or Roger Warren, or whatever. We'll just literally, whatever's on your mind. This is just free-flowing, free-for-all discussion or dialogue.
Let us bring that to the table in a little described format. This is proposal A, proposal B, proposal C, maybe. And what you're saying is a little bit like my podcast example that I shared earlier, my number 2 on the list. Let's work on this, half a page each, bring it to your attention, the council, and then we decide in the March meeting how we want to proceed and where we want to start. I don't think we want to overwhelm all of us by doing everything, but let's pick the one that we want to start with, and then maybe 2 or 3 months later we do the next one based on how the response is going to be, right? And we'll take it from there. But I think we want to test some of these formats, and then we'll see what works the best,
Agreed.
okay?
Yep, start somewhere.
Michael and I will work on that.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine.
Just so that I understand, what Michael suggested, does that also include other types of format that Brad had discussed with regards to being able to maybe communicate things that he wanted to communicate through either, is that something that you guys are working on, is that different?
Well,
like
I
through
think
a
maybe
blog
we
or
want to
something?
focus on these town hall type
Okay.
and maybe podcast-like in the public kind of things. That to me would be another one, but maybe we want to wait with this one until we have the new communications managers on board. But
Well, in-
I would keep that a little separate.
I think that's reasonable, particularly since there may be some system or architecture related issues but that might be part, I don't know if that should be part of the conversation that's occurring with the website design firm that you're working with or not.
About what, how to capture,
Well, no, how to, is there an ability to kind of use I don't know if it's the website architecture or a distribution mechanism to send out, separate communications.
Well, I'm
yeah, we
curious just
can-
to see how interactive it is. I mean, so both things, both the manager needs to get here so we can interact, see that. in live.
well, what Brad, I think, is asking about, so it's, right now, the way that we do it is not through our web page, but through our web browser. But right now, we go through Constant Contacts, and we have it all segregated out, so that if you wanted to, for instance, just target a certain group, we can just send it out to that group.
And so, for example, just asking the question because I don't know the answer to this, if I just wanted to say literally, my bbelt@kiwaisland.org, I'm sending an email. The 2 is Toki distribution list. There's literally just
Right.
I could put in whatever it is, and it would go out. That
Yep.
capability.
We have that capability.
That capability already exists, okay,
Yep, it already
thank you.
exists.
One other kind of communications-related issue, just minor, and I'd forgotten to mention this earlier, is, and several people have asked me about this, there is not contact information for, I think, any of our commission members, committee members.
No, that's going to be added onto the new website. It's not on the current website.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, okay, Steph? All right, that wraps up our planning retreat, with 10 minutes to spare. So why don't we adjourn and meet back here in 10 minutes?
Move to adjourn the meeting, Mr. Mayor?
All in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
Just need to pick a time.